Okay, well, welcome to Chapter 14 here, Robbery, Burglary, and Related Crimes. This is building on a little bit of what we covered in our last chapter, whether it's last week for you or the last hour, Chapter 13, which was all about the larcenies, the taking of property. This is going to be the taking of property, but it's going to be coupled with a few other factors. Either it's going to be, when we talk about robbery broadly, it's going to be something like from the person, or burglary, it's going to be from a specific location. And then there are some related crimes that we're going to take a look at. But we're moving through our chapters. We're at 14 today. There are 19 in our text. So we should be finishing those up relatively soon. We've got 5 more chapters after this or so. We're including this, plus a little bit of North Carolina law. So let's talk about robbery generally. Robbery is different than common theft. So we have the common law definition of theft, which is different than the common law definition of robbery. A theft is your larceny, the taking of another's property. Robbery builds upon that. Robbery adds this additional factor. And that additional factor classically is that you take the property by force or threat of force. So either I put the gun in your face, that's the threat of force, or I actually shoot you and then take your wallet. So theft can occur without force and outside of a victim's presence. You can leave the room to go get a drink of Coke or a Pepsi, and you can have left your laptop there, and I can steal your laptop. Conversely, I can walk in, see your laptop, think, I want it, I'm going to take it. I come up, I pull a wrench out of my pocket, and I say, I'm going to hit you across the head if you don't give me your laptop. That'd be from your purpose. Now, the same thing's getting stolen, the laptop. It's your laptop in both cases. But in one case, since you're not there, it's going to just be a larceny, arguably a felonious larceny given the value of the laptop probably. But in the other case, it's going to be a robbery because it's from your presence. So it has the same elements as other theft, but it adds in from your presence, and it adds in that threat of force. Now, there is a minority of jurisdictions that make use or talk about causing serious bodily injury as a substitute for use of force. And if you think about that, obviously some things would be both. If I pull a gun or if I hit you with a wrench, that's serious bodily injury. But it could get a little murky about how serious that bodily injury is. North Carolina doesn't go down that road too much. So let's look at North Carolina robbery. Now, we retain the idea of at the common law, the robber or robbery in North Carolina. And we classify this as a relatively minor felony. It's Class G. And if you remember, in North Carolina, we classify our felonies starting with Class A, which is worst of the worst. That's murder, basically, first-degree murder. Then we go B1, B2, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So you can see that we're way down the list, which means a robbery, all things being equal, no one's killed, no one's harmed. It's going to be, a serious crime. It could call for multiple months in prison, but it's not as serious as, say, assault with a deadly weapon or a rape. Okay, so the elements of this in North Carolina is you have to commit the larceny. You have to commit the underlying theft of the property. It's got to be from the person, and that would mean, of course, your wedding ring that's on your hand, the earrings you have in your ear, the pendant around your neck, the wallet that's in your back pocket, the purse that's strung over your arm, or from the person's presence. And I would say the area immediately under your control. So the laptop in front of you, your book that you're reading that's by the nightstand, those would all be from your presence. And the final qualification is it has to be done by violence or intimidation. And, the violence and intimidation is going to call for a little bit more of an explanation. Okay, so let's talk about that force, violence or intimidation in North Carolina. Force must be used in the course of the theft. So when I was in Milan a year or two ago, when I was over visiting my daughter, I was on a subway in Milan, and I felt another man's hand in my pocket. He was trying to pick my pocket. Now, at that point, he wasn't using force, right? He was using some level of physical force to remove the wallet, but he didn't shove me, he didn't punch me, he didn't kick me, he didn't threaten me. He was just kind of surreptitiously, without my knowledge, trying to take my wallet. Now, I felt it, so I put my hand in my pocket and stopped him. At that point, he withdrew his hand very rapidly and moved away. That would be an attempted pickpocketing, which is a crime, and almost all states will make it a crime. It's an attempted larceny, but it's not going to be a robbery. However, let's suppose when I put my hand in my pocket, he punched me to try to get away, or he punched me to try to get my wallet. At that point, it's force. The force can come from the theft itself in the course of it, or from trying to escape after a successful theft, or even an unsuccessful theft. Also, sometimes people might use a drug or even alcohol to immobilize someone so that they can steal from them. Now, if someone gets drunk or immobilized by themselves, they go in a bar, they get drunk, they go outside, they pass out. You come across, you say, hey, boy, they got a beautiful diamond ring on their finger. I'm just going to take it. You reach down, you take the ring off. You didn't get them drunk, so it's not a robbery. But if you were in the bar and said, wow, it's a cool diamond ring, I'm going to get this guy drunk so I can steal it later, you did commit the robbery. So they'd have to be linked together. Now, threat or intimidation. Sometimes you don't use the actual force. Sometimes I take out a wrench and I say, give me your wallet or your ring or your earrings, your purse, and I hit you in the head to get you to give it to me. That's using actual force. But sometimes the threat of it is enough. And obviously, the more serious the object you have, the more serious the force. So if I take a gun out and I point it at you and I say, give me your wallet, that's a deadly force. I'm threatening deadly force. I'm trying to intimidate you. Now, of course, students then ask me, well, what about if someone, has an object in their pocket? They don't show you that it's a gun, but it looks like that there's something sticking out of their pocket, pointed at you, and the guy says, give me your wallet or else. Is that going to be a robbery? And the answer in North Carolina is yes, it is, if when the person arrested and he goes on trial, if the jury hears it and they believe he had a gun. Because what he's going to do, obviously, is lie. He's going to say, well, I didn't have a gun. It was a pen, right? And what the other guy is going to say, the person who was robbed, is, I reasonably believed it to be a pen. And the testimony of the victim alone is sufficient to establish it. So the threat has to be of immediate bodily harm. It has to be, give me your wallet or I'm going to shoot you. Give me the laptop or I'm going to hit you with this wrench. It can't be future harm. You better give me that laptop or I'm coming over to your house tomorrow and beat you up. You better give me that ring or I'm going to tell your wife you're having an affair. That's not robbery. That's extortion. It's still a crime. But it's a threat of bodily harm in the future. If you're talking about I'm going to come over and shoot you, or it's a communication of a threat, something like blackmail, extortion in the future. In some jurisdictions, most jurisdictions, I would say, a reasonable person would actually have to be afraid. So let's suppose you've got someone who's 6'8" and 400 pounds, and he bench presses, 600 pounds, and he is a black belt in Taekwondo and a Navy SEAL, and he's eating an ice cream cone, and up comes a child who is 3'1" and weighs 60 pounds soaking wet, and tries to take the ice cream cone from him. Well, in a lot of jurisdictions, you would say that's not a robbery because he's in that circumstances, he's not afraid. Now, on the other hand, if the kid comes up and the kid's got a loaded gun and points it at the Navy SEAL and says, give me the ice cream cone, even if the Navy SEAL feels like, well, I can probably take it away from that kid, a reasonable person would be afraid in that circumstance, and that would be a robbery. If you just surrender based upon no conduct whatsoever, someone comes up, doesn't threaten you, and says, give me your ice cream cone, and you just give it to him, in most cases, that's not enough of a threat or intimidation to trigger robbery. Still larceny. All right, so threats and intimidations in North Carolina. North Carolina does not require the actual violence, just the fear of immediate injury. And I would add to that physical injury to make it clearer. And the fear has to lead to the surrendering of some personal property on your person. All right, now, obviously, this is just the basis. And like most of the law, we're going to build on the basis of robbery. And the next thing we're going to add on is armed or aggravated robbery. As I said, North Carolina breaks down its felonies starting with A, which is murder in the first degree, then B1, B2, which are your rapes, your sexual assaults, your assault with a deadly weapon inflicting serious injury, or assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill. Then it goes C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So we go all the way down to the G's before we get to the robbery. But building up from there, making it more severe, are a number of crimes in North Carolina that are worse. So yes, it's bad if you rob from someone by threat of force. Give me your wallet or I'll punch you. But it's worse. It might go from a G felony to a C felony if I use a gun. So theft statutes make the severity of the offense depend upon a number of things. One of the things is that threat. The other thing could be, how much property are you taking? Are you taking an ice cream cone? It's not very serious, right? Are you taking someone's diabetes medicine? That's really serious. Are you taking someone's oxygen canister they need to live? Are you taking $10,000 from them? Or are you taking $1? Also, what are you using? Again, are you using a gun? Now, as I said, the weapon has to be believed by the person who sees it, okay, or believes it's there, the victim. The weapon doesn't have to be real or functional. So if I take a prop gun and I point it at you and you look down and it looks like a real gun, but it's not one, okay? Or I point it at you and it's not loaded, it's still going to be armed robbery. And North Carolina, for example, will do a sentencing enhancement of a lot of robberies. Now, it can be robberies, it can be larcenies, where we'll add up to 5 years on your sentence for using a gun. So let's look at armed robbery in North Carolina. This is North Carolina General Statute 1487, robbery with firearm or dangerous weapon. And you look, we went from a G to a D. Now, just having a weapon's not enough. Let's suppose I've got a weapon. It's tucked in, behind my pants, okay, so you can't see it, and I come up and I take something from you in a robbery. But I don't display the weapon, you don't see the weapon, you don't know I have the weapon. And then I get caught, later, and I've got the weapon on me. They might like to charge armed robbery. In fact, they might actually charge it and try to get you to plead to something else, but you haven't met the elements. And here are the elements of this in North Carolina. You commit or attempt to commit a larceny, okay, so you're stealing from another person, that's going to make it the robbery, by possession or use of a firearm, okay, or threatened use of the firearm or other dangerous weapon. So if I took a knife out and pointed it at your eyes, or if I was swinging a 2x4, that weapon that endangers or threatens the life of the person. One of the things is a firearm is, under the law, per se or automatically a deadly weapon. A knife is a deadly weapon. But there are some things like, well, is a stick a deadly weapon? No, probably not per se, but it can be in a circumstance. Is a 2x4 a deadly weapon? No, it's a piece of lumber, but when I'm swinging it, it could be a deadly or dangerous weapon. All right, let's look at carjacking. What happens very frequently in the law in the modern age is a number of crimes capture the media attention. And a few years back, carjacking was that crime. Right now, I would say although we're at the end of it, it's this retail theft rings, people busting in, large numbers of people busting into places and stealing. These crimes are typically not very common, but they make the news very often because they're dramatic. And then politicians say, well, I'm going to, hop on this bandwagon. I'm going to criminalize this. Carjacking is the forcible taking of another's motor vehicle against their will with the intent to keep it. This has always been a crime, but sometimes, as I said, when a crime becomes notorious, we will carve out a special statute. The taking occurs even if the true owner of the car remains in the car during the carjacking. So if I'm in the car in the back seat and you come in and you take the car, even though I'm in it, and you take it against my will, that's carjacking. A carjacker may also be convicted of kidnapping at that point, which again makes it a very serious crime. If they move me a substantial distance. So I'm sitting in the passenger seat. Let's suppose that I own a car jointly with my wife. My wife goes into the CVS to get something. I'm sitting in the passenger seat. A man comes, jumps in the driver's seat, takes off, right? He has stolen the car with me in it. That's actually a kidnapping, okay? Carjacking cases don't always fit nicely into it if you can't show that they intended to keep the car. Now, very often it becomes a presumption that, you're going to keep the car. But sometimes people just take cars to use them without the intent to keep them. And that's joyriding. So that can be an issue that the prosecution and the defense will fight about. Most states and the federal government have passed statutes making carjacking a separate offense. Now, most states is not North Carolina because North Carolina has no separate statute for stealing cars. What we're more interested in is how much value is the car. So we have larceny of motor vehicle parts, we have joyriding, and we have larceny of motor vehicle fuel. Those are most of the car-related ones. So if I talk about joyriding here, and I might be jumping ahead, but joyriding is simply I'm taking a car to use it, but I'm not intending to steal it. Very often this is teenagers that do it. So they know where someone's keys are. They go and they take the keys, they drive around in the car, then they bring it back or they abandon it in a parking lot. They didn't intend to steal the car. They were going to transfer title. They were going to take it to a chop shop. They were just wanted to use it without permission. That's joyriding. And you can see the joyriding, if you can prove it, much better crime to be charged with. It's class 1 misdemeanor in North Carolina, which is much better. That's days in jail as opposed to months in prison. All right, let's talk about home invasion. We're working our way towards burglaries here. Home invasion requires the unlawful entry of a dwelling of another person with the intent to commit a crime, with that person being present. In most states, and again, this is that dangerous weapon enhancement we see, if you're armed, you get more penalties. And I would say in North Carolina, if you have a gun, it's just going to tack on extra time. And the rationale behind that is it's better that people commit crimes don't have guns. If crimes are rational, if people think about them, if they think about them at all, hopefully they'll think, I better not bring a gun because if I get caught, it's extra time. That's the thinking behind it. Home invasion robbery is the robbery of a person inhabiting a home or a dwelling. In some states, and we'll talk about North Carolina, the defendant can be convicted both of the home invasion, breaking in, and any other crime. And it could be a horrific crime. It could be you could be convicted of the home invasion, the burglary or whatever we're talking about here, and a rape inside or a murder inside. Other states hold that the home invasion bars conviction of related crimes such as residential burglary. Home invasion differs in that someone's home. Now, North Carolina just builds this into our burglary statute, and we'll look at that right now. Home invasion in North Carolina. We don't have it as a crime. Instead, we have first and second degree burglary. Now, I will break down all the elements of first and second degree burglary in a little bit. We actually have some weird crimes. We have preparation to commit a burglary, and that can be possession of burglar tools, for example. We have burglary with explosives, for those of you that are a tad ambitious. And we actually also have a statute called breaking out of a dwelling, where you may have gotten into the dwelling without a breaking and entering, and now you're trying to get out and you actually commit it. Okay, we'll cover that more when this was home invasion. When we get to the burglaries, we'll make that a lot clearer. Now, your book, I think, kind of out of sequence, adds in perch snatching here at this point. Many states have added perch snatching and sudden snatching, even if no force is used. Now, North Carolina does not use this. But this addresses the use of force more clearly, but the force doesn't go beyond what you need to take the item. Taking a purse in someone's possessions, not a robbery if the victim's resistance doesn't happen. But if you grab them, you spin them around, then grab the purse, that's going to be purse snatching. Again, North Carolina, that's either going to be just the simple larceny, the taking of the property depending upon the value, or we're going to make it a felonious larceny, a robbery, if you use any sort of force. Now, we had talked just a tad about extortion before, and we're going to differentiate between extortion and what most people think about when they think about extortion, which is blackmail. But we're going to do that in North Carolina because North Carolina makes it a little bit clearer. Under the common law, extortion was when officials demanded illegal services, fees for their service. But modern codes make extortion any threat of harm in the future to force someone to give them money or property. Now, how is this different than robbery? Because it's a future threat and it's not immediate harm. Remember, robbery is, I'm going to take this wrench and hit you across the face. Extortion is, I want that laptop, I want your ring, I want your wallet, or I'm going to come over and beat you up tomorrow, or I'm going to tell your wife you're having an affair. Unlike robbery, a taking doesn't have to occur. The attempt is enough. The threat can be, I'm going to bodily harm you. I'm going to hit you with this wrench tomorrow or beat you up tomorrow. It can be, I'm going to go burn down your house tomorrow. It can be, or I will accuse you of committing burglary yourself or rape or murder. Or I'm going to disclose some disgraceful secret, like, you root for Chapel Hill. Sorry, just had to get a dig in since State's making a run at the Final Four. I might regret that because we'll see if they can actually pull this off, although they upset Duke last night. This disgraceful secret goes to how society categorizes people, how society shames people. So in the past, one of the things that you could accuse someone of, believe it or not, was if you accused a woman of being unchaste. In other words, if the woman would be having sex, that would be a disgraceful secret that you could threaten and extort something from them. Another classic example is accusing someone of being gay. In cases of threats to file criminal charges or expose secrets, it's not a defense to say it's true. Now, this is why lawyers have to be careful when we write demand letters. If I write a letter for a client demanding that someone my client is a dispute about property about, and I say, oh, by the way, since you took this property and it's not yours and you're not giving it back to my client, I'm going to file criminal charges if you don't do it. Well, guess what? I've extorted property. I'm not allowed to do that. I can, in a roundabout way, let them know that it's a criminal act, but I can't threaten criminal prosecution to gain advantage in a civil case, or it's extortion. All right, so let's look at North Carolina. Technically, extortion has superseded what most people think about with extortion, which is the term blackmail. Most people, if you ask them, if I demand something from you and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to release a secret, what's that called? Most people say, oh, that's blackmail. It's actually not in North Carolina. Extortion is a Class F felony. Believe it or not, blackmail is a Class 1 misdemeanor. And what distinguishes the two is that blackmail has to be written. Very few people are dumb enough to threaten someone in writing. Most of the time, if I'm going to threaten you, hey, give me your wallet or I will beat you up tomorrow, I'm going to say that. I'm not going to send you a note saying, if you don't give me your wallet tomorrow, I'm going to beat you up. Because what you're going to do is you're going to turn that over to the police. So the elements of extortion in North Carolina are you threaten or communicates a threat to another. Excuse me, I'm getting a lot of different messages here. You threaten or communicate a threat to another with the intent to wrongfully obtain anything of value, any acquittance, any advantage, or any immunity. So if I say, if you don't give me, let's suppose you're going through a divorce. If you say, well, if you don't give me the car in the divorce, I'm not going to give you the house in the divorce. That's not extortion, okay? You did communicate, okay, but you're not trying to wrongfully obtain something. But if I say, if you don't give me the car, I'm going to tell your brother that you're gay, that would be extortion. Any offer not to press criminal charges for money or advantage is extortion. So you have to be really, really careful when you bring that issue up. All right, I said I was going to get to burglary. Let's take a look at burglary. Burglary is a very serious crime. The common law definition of burglary is you break into the dwelling of another at night to commit a felony. But it has really been changed quite a bit. Burglary today is defined as unlawful entry into or remaining in a building with the intent to commit a crime. The common law elements may have been retained, and in North Carolina, indeed, they have been, such as, did you do it at night, or is it a dwelling? So let's look at North Carolina and the degrees of burglary. So we have first-degree burglary in North Carolina, and we have second-degree burglary in North Carolina. We have felony or felonious breaking and entering of a building. We have breaking or entering of a place of worship. We have breaking or entering of a vehicle. As I said earlier, if you're ambitious, we have burglary with explosives. We have safe cracking. We even have safe cracking by removal of the safe. So let's look at North Carolina's first and second degree burglaries and the elements and compare and contrast them. All right. So first degree burglary, Class D felony. Second degree burglary, not a Class D felony. And what's the difference between the two? Well, let's look. First of all, it is a breaking, which is to make an opening no matter how small. Now, making an opening can be you broke the window, can be you opened the window. You kick down the door or you turn the handle and open the door. Enter. You're physically going from the outside to the inside without consent, and so far we're tracking identical. The dwelling house or sleeping apartment, so we're really concerned with your home, but a very broad definition of home. So we're going to include things like your apartment, any place you're staying, your hotel room. Of another, so you can't be charged with burglary of your own home. At night, each of them tracked, with the intent to commit any felony therein. Both are present. The difference between the two, you'll notice, is that element, actually occupied. If someone's home and you commit a burglary, it's a Class D felony. You're looking at multiple years in prison. If nobody's home, it's a Class G felony. You're looking at a far lighter sentence. Now, again, it can be that intent to commit any felony or larceny. So a felony could be you broke in with the intent to kill someone, you broke in with the intent to rape someone. That could be a burglary. It does have to be at night, from when the sun goes down to when the sun comes up. All right, so the unlawful entry. Unlawful means both classical forceful entry, like breaking a window, but it also can be entering breaking into someplace that you don't have permission to go in at that time. Now, if a building's open to the public, or if you have a right to enter the building, it's not a burglary, even if the entry was to commit a crime. So let's suppose I'm allowed to go into your house because I'm dog sitting the house, and I break in and I'm going to steal something, okay? Well, it's not an unlawful entry because I had permission to go in your house. Example that your book uses, a janitor uses a key to enter a building he regularly cleans. Using the key to enter the building to steal from the owner is not burglary. Now, entry is when some part of your body, your pinky, your right index finger, your toe, or something that's an extension of you, like a crowbar, goes from the outside to the inside. That's entry. Now, a lot of the time what we mean is you physically go from the outside to the inside, and that's 99 times out of 100. But let's suppose we stop you just as you put that crowbar in to force the window open or the door open. Burglary is not completed theft if the entry with intent to commit is a crime. Using a small child to go through an opening is entry. Staying behind after business closes is unlawful entry. Using an instrument to break the plane or the three-dimensional barriers of a dwelling is entry. So let's look at North Carolina. Breaking is to make an opening, however slight. Be aware, though, that if a door is wide open, that's not going to be a breaking. So if not unlocked, just open. So if there is an open garage door and you walk into the garage, you didn't break when you came in. Entering an open door is not enough. But if it's an unlocked door, if the door is just shut but not locked and you turn the handle so you can walk in, that's a breaking in North Carolina. Remember, we also have entering, which is basically identical to what we talked about, putting some part of your body, no matter how small, into the dwelling or some extension of your body. So again, you use that crowbar to force the window or something to pick the lock. That'd be enough. And we do have a requirement for it being at night, and that's after sunset and before sunrise. It's not a set time. It doesn't say between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. because the days vary because of the planet goes around the sun and the planet rotates. So we have different times that we have sunrise, sunset. The dwelling house of another. The common law required that the dwelling house of another, because we wanted to keep it away from if you going into your own house, the natural right of habitation. Modern statutes usually omit the dwelling house of another and make it simply unlawful entry to exclude one's own home. Typically, that sounds very confusing. One can't burgle one's own residence, even if the entry was to commit the crime. Since the entry is privileged, you're allowed to. Entry can become unprivileged, though, and here's where that dwelling house of another can be an issue, is if there's a protective order. So let's suppose that a spouse gets a 50B in North Carolina, which is an order for another person not to come within a distance of them against their spouse because their spouse is committing abuse. At that point, the spouse goes to the house that they own with the wife or the husband, and they enter the house. They break, they turn the handle, and they enter the house. Now, it's not of another because it's their house, but they're not allowed to go in the house. So some states simply use the term unlawful. Now, North Carolina doesn't tend to do that. North Carolina dwelling house means any structure regularly used for sleeping, covering homes, whether they're fully or temporarily occupied or occupied regularly. It also covers a hotel, a motel, or rooming house. What about your intent when you break in? Okay, so broadly, intent to commit a felony. Part of the elements of burglary is you're intending to do something. Now, most people, when they think burglary, are thinking you're entering to rob. You're entering to take something. right? Using a sloppy language of robbery as opposed to larceny. Common law burglary required a proof to commit a felony, but most states, including North Carolina, have broadened this. Most states now require that you prove an intent to steal, or in North Carolina, commit a felony. Others say it just has to be the intent to commit some crime. Other states specify the crimes, like, okay, you broke in to commit murder, arson, rape, or robbery, or larceny. Others require an intent to commit a larceny or theft be actually shown. Some say, well, if you're in the building, intent is presumed. So whether the intent must exist at the time the building was entered or afterwards can be an issue as well. So let's look at North Carolina, the one I'm most familiar with. Typically, taking any property, regardless of the property's value, is enough. And any felony will do, because North Carolina says intent to commit any larceny or felony. So if you're breaking in to commit a murder or rape, you're there. How do we prove that intent? How do we know what you're going to do? Well, we can do it circumstantial evidence. Did you have duct tape, a knife, and handcuffs? You were breaking in to tie someone up, and that's going to be enough. Did you break in with a gun and a note that says, I'm going to kill Bob? That's enough. Breaking and entering can be inferred. Defendants can offer evidence that they didn't have a felonious purpose. It's a snowy night, you're freezing to death, you're in the woods, there's a house, you break into the house to prevent hypothermia. Maybe you didn't have the authority to do that. Maybe you shouldn't have been in the woods at night. Maybe it's not a life-threatening situation, but okay, you now have evidence that you broke in for non-felonious purposes. It's not going to be that burglary. All right, well, people steal stuff, then they got to do something with it, and that's going to be trafficking in stolen goods. This is going to be either receiving goods that are stolen, concealing goods that are stolen, or transferring goods that are stolen. The person who buys and sells goods that are stolen is called a fence. They can be charged with receiving, concealing, possessing, buying, transferring, and so on. He's really the middle person. He's really the person economically that drives some of this besides the consumer. So, one of the things is that everybody that steals in a large sense, and I don't mean you stole a sticky bun to eat. You steal, 5 iPhones. You're going to want to sell those. You're going to want to convert that to cash. So someone's got to buy them. And very often the person that buys them knows they're stolen. So this person is intimately involved in the crime. Now, if you're buying a really cheap iPhone that someone's selling on the side of the road, you may think, well, maybe it's stolen or maybe it's not stolen. I don't know. Maybe it's just a good deal. And the person might say, oh, no, I'm just getting rid of my old iPhone. Okay, So you have a secondary consumer, in other words. All right, so what does North Carolina have to say about this? Well, North Carolina has lots of crimes related to this. And one of the things we have is transfer or selling stolen goods. Now, here's something interesting, kind of a quirk in North Carolina. It is a felony to sell stolen goods if it is over a certain value, or if it's a house, a mule. This should be horse, actually, not house, excuse me. It's a horse, a mule, a swine, a pig, a cattle, or a dog. You notice that cat's not on that list. It is a felony if the value is over $1,000, and you can be charged with receiving stolen goods if you have reasonable grounds to know. Now, you may not know 100% that something's stolen, but if someone offers to sell you an ounce of gold that's worth $1,000 and they're going to give it to you for $100 right now, you got a pretty good basis to believe that that's stolen. Possession of criminal or burglary tools. Now, we have this in North Carolina, as I said, but all states have statutes making the possession of criminal or burglary tools a criminal offense. Here are the classic elements. We'll look at North Carolina's in a second. The defendant has a device or implement in his or her possession which was suitable or capable of being used in committing burglary. And it's usually something pretty specific, like lock picks, not just you had a crowbar. The defendant intended to use this device or implement to break into a building, a dwelling, or depository with intent to steal. It can be a little difficult to prove. If you just catch someone with a crowbar, it's hard to prove they're possessing burglary tools. If you catch them at night outside a house with lock picks, and the lock showing evidence that it's been messed with and the person has the lock picks out and he's just walking around, that's pretty good. But between the guy just walking down the street with something that maybe could be used to break into a house and the guy you catch red-handed, there's a lot of distance. Let's look at North Carolina's. North Carolina has North Carolina possession of burglary tools, North Carolina 14-55. Preparation to commit a burglary or another's house breaking covers if you're found armed with any intent or dangerous weapon or without lawful excuse if you have any picklock, key, or other implement of lock breaking. It's Class I felony. All right, vandalism, very common crime. Vandalism is almost a mindless crime. It's a crime committed for the enjoyment of destruction. Vandalism is a very serious crime. It can cost millions of dollars. They tend to occur in cycles. There tend to be patterns of this. So it can be, is someone, painting graffiti? Is someone blowing up mailboxes? Is someone doing something to cause this damage? And as I said, it tends to occur in cycles. It tends to be an adolescent crime, an adolescent male crime, but not always. Laws are passed sometimes to make parents responsible, because one of the things that can surprise a lot of people about the law is if a kid commits a crime and the crime causes damage to someone. So let's suppose a 12 or 13-year-old throws a baseball through someone's window. Are the parents responsible legally to pay for the window? In a lot of jurisdictions, the answer is no, they're not. So you might try to make them responsible under vandalism laws. So let's look at vandalism in North Carolina. North Carolina General Statute 14-159-1 and others. For example, we have a specific graffiti statute. Willfully and wantonly injure or destroy the real property of another, it's a Class 1 misdemeanor. So if I knock down your mailbox, if I break your bird fountain out front, if I drive on your yard and do donuts, all of those are vandalism acts in North Carolina. It's a Class 1 misdemeanor. You're looking at probably a maximum sentence in jail of a few weeks. If you get caught painting graffiti, this with multiple convictions can become a felony, but you got to work at it. Criminal or defiant trespass, and then we'll look at North Carolina's trespass statutes, and we're getting close to the end here. So we try to keep this right at 50 minutes to an hour. Criminal trespass occurs when a person unlawfully and knowingly enters the land of another person. So if I'm just walking in the woods and I'm taking a hike and I'm walking along a stream that I thought was public land and I walk onto your land, I'm not trespassing unless I know that that's your land. That raises defiant trespassing. This occurs when you enter after you've been given notice of trespass and you've refused to leave. So you've entered someone's land. Hey, I'm walking along the stream, I'm walking onto your land, and all of a sudden I give you notice that you're on my land. Hey, that's my land, you need to leave. And you say, well, I'm just walking around the stream, man. I'm going to finish walking, taking my hike. And you keep right on walking. That is, in some states, defiant trespassing. If you enter into or remain in a building or premises without the intent to commit a crime, it's not a burglary, but it can be a trespass. The crime of trespass covers these illegal acts. If the entry is unlawful, it is criminal trespass. If the entry was privileged, you were allowed to, but the privilege is withdrawn, you can't be here anymore, then it's defiant trespass. Because sometimes people can, they can come into your house. You might invite someone in your house. They knock on your door. Hey, can I talk to you about something? Sure. and they're in your house for a while, and you say, I don't want this person in my house. And you say, okay, you got to leave. And the person says, well, I'm not going to leave. Well, at that point, it's defiant trespass. So let's look as our final slide about what North Carolina does here. So as I said, North Carolina has multiple offenses here. We've got first-degree trespass. Now, first-degree trespass, you're entering property that was locked or secured. And that could be theoretically outside. It could be there is a gate that is closed and locked, even if it's a very simple lock to open. That could be a first-degree trespass. It could be a shed behind someone's house. That could be a first-degree trespass. Second-degree trespass, and by the way, of course, first-degree trespass is going to be a Class 2 misdemeanor. Again, not terribly serious. Less serious is second-degree trespass. You enter property marked with no trespass or remain after being asked to leave. Now, one of the questions I get from students all the time is, well, what about if the person says they didn't see the sign that said no trespassing? Well, North Carolina law says you only have to post the sign, no trespassing, in a manner that's reasonably likely to come to the attention of someone entering it. I don't have to actually prove you saw the sign. If I did, everyone would simply say, I didn't see the sign, you can't prove I did, so you can't charge second-degree trespass. Class 3 misdemeanor. The last crime we'll talk about, and the most serious one here, is domestic criminal trespass. Now, I had mentioned this a little bit before, but one of the most common dangers people face, particularly women, is in abusive domestic situations. Yes, this does happen where women abuse men, and it may happen more commonly than we think. But I'm going to use the example of a woman being the potential victim of a man. So let's suppose a wife or a girlfriend or a significant other is in fear from someone that they are married to or have been dating or know or has simply been harassing them. What they can do is they can go and they can get a court order. And the example I used was a 50B. Now, they don't absolutely have to get the court order, but they can, and it makes it much better, much easier. And if I have a past relationship with you and I have this order and you enter my house, that's a Class 1 misdemeanor. If we make this worse, if someone has been harassing, threatening, maybe injuring someone in the past, and that injured party had to flee to a safe house, and now they're in the safe house and this person that was harassing or injuring or stalking them follows them there and trespasses into that house. Now we're going to bump that up to a felony. We're going to go, okay, we're done messing around with weeks in jail. We're going to start talking about months in prison. Because, unfortunately in our society, domestic assault, assaulting partners, or domestic injury, even homicides, are very often tied to these domestic relationships. And we've come to that realization. So this is really the beginning of where we escalate the penalties we have, where we start to say, okay, you have someone domestically criminal trespass, we'll make that a felony. We'll have someone who assaults someone, in a domestic relationship, we can make that a felony. We can, if you kill a spouse, obviously we're going to make that first-degree murder. So all of these are present. Okay, well, we've finished up this chapter, and whenever you're ready, we'll move on to the next one. But have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, and I will see you in the next chapter, or you will hear me more accurately.